This training is on sexual assault. Assault is defined as sexual contact made by force, trickery, or bribery where there's an imbalance in age, size, power, or knowledge. Contact may include fondling, exhibitionism, masturbation, intercourse, oral or anal sex, prostitution, or viewing of or participation in pornography. Sexual assault is any form of uncoerced sexual contact ranging from fondling to rape. So, you may ask again, what is sexual assault? To put it plainly, sexual assault is any time anyone does anything of a sexual nature where there is not active consent. It's not about sex, it's about power and control, and it's equal to torture. Michigan's law says no one can give consent if they are under the age of 16, is under the influence of drugs or alcohol, or if they are mentally impaired or physically helpless. Michigan is a consent state. So in the past, it was no means no. But now the law is stating that you need a firm yes. Yes means yes. So how do you get consent? How do you maintain it? First of all, don't assume anything and ask the question. Consent is welcome, mutual, and desirable. Coercion is self-centered. There's pressure involved in it, and it's deceitful. When you're talking about force, it's intimidating, it's threatening, and it causes fear. So let's watch a video about consent.
If you're still struggling with consent, just imagine instead of initiating sex, you're making them a cup of tea. You say, "Hey, would you like a cup of tea?" And they go, "Oh my God, I would love a cup of tea, thank you." Then you know they want a cup of tea. If you say, "Hey, would you like a cup of tea?" And they're like, I'm not really sure. Then you could make them a cup of tea, or not, but be aware they might not drink it. And if they don't drink it, then, and this is the important part, don't make them drink it. Just because you made it doesn't mean you are entitled to watch them drink it. And if they say no thank you, then don't make them tea. At all. Just don't make them tea. Don't make them drink tea. Don't get annoyed at them for not wanting tea. They just don't want tea, okay? They might say, "Yes, please. That's kind of you." And then when the tea arrives, they actually don't want the tea at all. Sure, that's kind of annoying as you've gone to all the effort of making the tea, but they remain under no obligation to drink the tea. They did want tea, now they don't. Some people change their mind in the time that it takes to boil the kettle, brew the tea, and add the milk. And it's okay for people to change their mind. And you are still not entitled to watch them drink it. And if they're unconscious, don't make them tea. Unconscious people don't want tea. And they can't answer the question, "Do you want tea?" because they're unconscious. Okay, maybe they were conscious when you asked them if they wanted tea. And they said yes. But in the time it took you to boil the kettle, brew the tea, and add the milk, they are now unconscious. You should just put the tea down. Make sure the unconscious person is safe. And this is the important part again. Don't make them drink the tea. They said yes then, sure, but unconscious people don't want tea. If someone said yes to tea, started drinking it, and then passed out before they'd finished it, don't keep on pouring it down their throat. Take the tea away. Make sure they're safe, because unconscious people don't want tea. Trust me on this. If someone said yes to tea around your house last Saturday, that doesn't mean they want you to make them tea all the time. They don't want you to come around to their place unexpectedly and make them tea and force them to drink it going, "But you wanted tea last week." Or to wake up to find you pouring tea down their throat going, "But you wanted tea last night." If you can understand how completely ludicrous it is to force people to have tea when they don't want tea, and you're able to understand when people don't want tea, then how hard is it to understand it when it comes to sex? Whether it's tea or sex, consent is everything. And on that note, I'm going to go make myself a cup of tea.
Okay, so let's talk about some myths or facts. If a person is sexually assaulted when they are drunk or wearing sleazy clothes, they are somewhat responsible for letting things get out of control. Is that a myth or a fact? Rapists are usually strangers hiding in the bushes at night carrying knives. Is that a myth or a fact? Most of the time, people falsely report being sexually assaulted. People who commit sexual violence act alone, keeping their plan secret. Men don't usually mean to force sex on people, they just get too sexually carried away. Are these myths or facts? They are all myths. The facts are most perpetrators are familiar to their victims 75 to 80% of the time. Victims delay reporting for numerous reasons. Victims forget and rearrange details. There's oftentimes no physical resistance. False reports are the same as any other violent crime, only 2 to 4%. Most sexual assaults are premeditated, thought through ahead of time, and other people know about it. So you may ask with this last one, how would other people know about it? So if someone says, I'm going to get that person drunk and have sex with them, then they are telling you that they are going to sexually assault someone. If an older person looks at a young girl and says, ooh, I would have sex with her, that's a red flag. No adult should be looking at a child in a sexual manner. That's people knowing about it. The fact of the matter is, most of the time when people say these types of things, we think that there is no way that a reasonable person would do these things. And so we tend to ignore it. Um, Stranger danger is a real thing. I'm not discounting the fact that there are serial rapists who go around preying on people that they don't know, but most of the time, whether it's a child or an adult, the perpetrators are familiar. Someone that they know, someone that they trust. So, who can sexually assault? It can be a family member, a date, acquaintance, or a stranger. So let's talk about the nice guy sequence. Okay, so first, the nice guy, what they do is they make their selection. Um, they pick out their target. And then there's testing, trying to get someone to do something that they probably shouldn't or wouldn't do. There's and then there's separation. They separate them from their support system, from a safe place. There's either consent or pressure. If they do not get um, pre- consent through coercion, which is not really consent, then they terminate the relationship. There's times when they use intimidation, and then there's the violation. After the violation, after the rape, after the sex act, they tend to then terminate the relationship. This is how the nice guy rapist appears. Let's talk about facilitator drugs. So, alcohol is the number one facilitator drug. It's legal to have if you're over 21. It's easy to obtain. It's socially acceptable. And it's not going away. Its use, double shotting, giving twice as much alcohol as the recipient thinks they're getting. Jungle juice, which is an improvised mixture of liquor. And why do rapists use it? Because it makes their target more controllable. GHB. GHB takes effect in about 15 minutes and can last 3 to 4 hours. It's very potent. A very small amount can have big effect. So it's easy to overdose on GHB. Most GHB is made by people in home or street labs, so you don't know what's in it or how it will affect you. One thing about GHB, um, there are perpetrators who will put it in a Visine dropper. And so when you're in a club or somewhere, they can easily hide it in their hand and drop it into your drink. And it tends to make your drink taste salty. That's something to look out for. Rohypnol. The effects of Rohypnol can be felt within 30 minutes of being drugged. It can last for several hours. If you are drugged, you might look or act like someone who is drunk. You might have trouble standing. Your speech may be slurred, or you might pass out. Now, the old style of Rohypnol are these little round pills. The new ones are these larger green pills. And if they're put into your drink or something, it will change the color of your drink. Rohypnol is also called roofies. That was made popular by the movie Hangover. Now, the reason why they're showing these as pills that look like they're used or prescribed by a pharmacy, because in other countries they are. This is a prescription drug, and so even though Rohypnol is not sold in the United States, it is sold in other countries under as a prescription drug. Ecstasy is a synthetic amphetamine, um, and it's a mind-altering drug that can cause you to hallucinate. It's been known to cause death, especially when mixed with alcohol. It's often used with speed by mixed with speed by drug dealers, often without the user knowing. Ecstasy does not come in capsules, by the way, and because ecstasy is a recreational drug, if someone gives you a capsule and they say, "Hey, would you like to try some X?" You need to know, or some Molly or whatever it's called. You need to know that that's not ecstasy. It comes in pill form usually, and and as you can see from this graphic, it has a lot of different pictures on it to make it seem like something that's fun. Or children could get a hold to it thinking it was candy. Ketamine is a very fast-acting drug. It was originally a horse tranquilizer. It is now it's being prescribed for migraines. So with ketamine, you might be aware of what's happening to you, but unable to move. It also causes memory problems. Later, you may not be able to remember what happened while you were drugged. Now, with the new prescriptions for ketamine, of course, it would have to be a large amount for you to get these effects from a prescription. But you need to know that it's more readily available now than it was before because it's being prescribed for migraines. When it was just a horse tranquilizer, people would steal from veterinarians and horse trainers or breeders to get this, but now it's more widely available. So there are different products that they use um, to be able to test for if you've been drugged or if something's been slipped in your drink. But these products are basically there to exploit your fears. There's coasters and stir sticks and even fingernail polish that will that you can use to see if your drink has been drugged. But they only work for ketamine and GHB. They're advised to use in well-lit areas. And I don't know about you, but I haven't seen a well-lit bar, club, school dance, or anything. And they're found not to work with cola, sports drinks, or citrus-based drinks, and not recommended for use with beverages. So that it's basically if your water has been drugged, these will work. So let's talk about working with victims of sexual assault. Okay, so because we've grown up with myths about sexual assault, it's very important to learn the facts in order to be able to be sensitive to the feelings and needs of rape survivors. If you don't seriously examine within yourself the very common tendencies to blame the victim, your judgmental attitude will creep into your choice of words or the tone of your voice. Many rape survivors have internalized these myths. If a survivor believes that only certain types of women get raped, rather than understanding that it could happen to any woman, her trauma will be intensified by her constant need to understand what happened to her. Your knowledge of the myths and facts about rape, your ability to communicate the differences in a caring way, will help a survivor in her healing. So, common reactions to sexual assault: fear and anxiety, re experiencing the trauma, increased arousal avoidance, guilt and shame, depression, negative beliefs about self and others, and the world, and relationship difficulties. Fear and anxiety occurs when views of the world and a sense of safety have changed. Triggers or cues that cause anxiety may include places, times of day, certain smells, or noises, or any situation that's a reminder of the assault. The feeling of vulnerability is often associated with physical anxiety symptoms, feelings of nervousness, jittery or muscle tension, agitation, restlessness, or trembling. Symptoms of anxiety can also include excessive worry, phobic reactions, panic attacks. There's also safety concerns. So, re-experiencing the trauma. Memories intrude upon other activities and thoughts. This means the person is continuing to master the assault experience. Memories cause much distress, increase feelings of vulnerability and helplessness, and interfere with daily living. Unwanted intrusive thoughts, flashbacks, vivid images of the assault is occurring again, and nightmares. Increased arousal. People who have been assaulted often see the world filled with danger, so their bodies are on constant alert, always ready to respond to any attack. They have rapid heart rate, shallow breathing, feeling jumpy, jittery, or shaky, easily startled, difficulty concentrating, difficulty sleeping. Continued arousal can lead to irritability, impatience, flight or fight response, and hypervigilance. Avoidance. Avoidance is a common way of managing trauma related pain. The most common type is avoiding situations that remind the person of the assault, such as the place where it happened. Often, situations that are less directly related to the trauma are avoided, such as going out in the evening if the assault happened at night. This can lead to feelings of numbness, which make it difficult for the person to have either fearful or pleasant and loving feelings. Sometimes the painful thoughts or feelings may be so intense that the person blocks them out altogether and cannot remember parts of the assault. Guilt and shame. In order to make sense of their experience, survivors may blame themselves. These feelings are often encouraged by societal attitudes and they interfere with self compassion, hindering recovery. I shouldn't have been drinking. I should have fought back harder. If I wouldn't have fought back, I wouldn't have gotten hurt. Feeling guilty for the assault means that the survivor is taking responsibility for the actions of the assailant. Feeling guilty, feeling guilt and shame may help the survivor feel like she had some control over the situation. However, it leads to feelings of helplessness and depression. Negative beliefs about self, others, and the world. Self image often becomes more negative. If I hadn't been so weak or stupid, this wouldn't have happened to me. I'm a bad person and deserve this. I'm a different person than I am before, or I'm damaged. Relationships with others can become tense. They may feel that people cannot be trusted, or men are dangerous, or people in authority can be counted on to help. The ability to be intimate in close relationship diminishes. They also feel that the world is a dangerous place. Good people are vulnerable to harm, and bad people may be rewarded, or there's little purpose in life or meaning to human existence. Some physical health symptoms and problems. Many rapes result in physical injury, pain from a wound or bruising, pelvic pain or rectal pain or bleeding. Stress-related illnesses and physical symptoms such as headaches, nausea, or gastrointestinal problems. Other repercussions would be STDs or STIs. Pregnancy estimated with rape is 4.7%, and fatalities occur in about 0.1% of all rape cases. The effects of sexual assault on the victim: 1 in 3 experience depression, 1 in 3 have contemplated suicide, 1 in 8 attempt suicide, and victims often turn to drugs and alcohol. Rape is the ultimate violation of the self. Short of homicide, with the invasion of one's inner and most private space, as well as a loss of autonomy and control. So let's talk about crisis intervention with sexual assault victims. A crisis is an acute emotional upset arising from situational, developmental, or social sources and resulting in a temporary inability to cope by means of one's usual problem solving devices. So, the goal of crisis intervention are closely linked with what's known from about recovery from trauma. Experts have described the core experience of psychological trauma are disempowerment and disconnection. Disempowerment refers to a decreased sense of personal control over one's life and environment. Disconnection refers to a sense of difference or alienation from others. Herman argues that the guiding principles behind all recovery efforts must therefore be re-empowerment and the establishment of new and meaningful relationships. So, the first goal, re-empowerment. The first principle of recovery is the empowerment of the survivor. She must be the author and arbiter of her own recovery. Others may offer advice, support, assistance, affection, and care, but not the cure. Efforts towards empowerment can be categorized as techniques of validation and stabilization. Validation occurs when the advocate shows concern for her well being, communicates empathy for her experience and its effects, offers meaningful emotional support, and provides helpful information. So, some validation techniques are typically listening skills that communicate to the survivor that she is believed and that it's safe to talk about her experience with you. They reinforce the resourcefulness and strength of the survivor and provide opportunity for emotional expression. Stabilization. Establish the safety of the survivor in situations where she may be suicidal, in need of immediate medical care, or in immediate danger of further assault. Number two, help the person manage her emotion so that she doesn't become overwhelmed and unable to function. And number three, stabilization means to decrease overwhelming emotional upset, to increase contact with the here and now, and to increase the survivor's sense of self-control. Stabilization techniques are typically more active and involve strategies to assure immediate social support and additional coping resources. They establish concrete actions, steps for the survivor. This is done within the context of collaborative relationship. The second goal is reconnection. The second goal is to establish a relationship that can lessen the survivor's feelings of alienation and restoring the survivor's trust. So, a model of crisis intervention. Number one, stabilizing the survivor and helping to restore her pre-crisis equilibrium. Challenging negative thinking, helping to mobilize and locate potential environmental resources to aid recovery, and limit the harm caused by non-supportive aspects of the environment. So, a recent model by Gillian and James introduces 6 steps. Define the problem, ensure the client's safety, provide support, examine alternatives, including referrals, make plans, and obtain a commitment. Do you want to work on this? I will check back in with you later. Make a commitment to stay in touch. Make a commitment that they won't harm themselves. Okay, this is just an overview of sexual assault um, and intervening in crisis situations. Again, if you have other questions or concerns, don't be afraid to reach out. I'm always here to help. Thanks.